Namaskar students, today we'll be moving into our English lecture number 29, and today we will be moving into the scientific school or the scientific theories, which is a very important school in international relations. So this came about in the 1950s, 1960s till about 1980, where you had this behavioral revolution, where there was an attempt of why can't theories of international relations, political science, and even the social sciences be more scientific, meaning if there's a cause, there can be an effect. Can we observe these criteria, social, political, economic variables? Can they be quantified? Are they measurable? If so, can it become an exact science? So these were the issues that were addressed, and we are starting with one of the first approaches that became very popular in international relations, called the systems approach. Now, systems approach, if you see, we look at the whole scientific school, they're talking about complex systems. What is it? Basically, when you're talking of politics or political science or international relations, you're dealing with human beings. Human beings are extremely complex, unpredictable. So you have had the game theory, the non-linear dynamic systems theory, pattern formation, evolution and adaptation, networks and collective behaviors. Now, system and structure. System describes how the units interact with each other, how they develop, survive, change, transform, and disintegrate. System as a concept has been applied across the spectrum of international relations. The view of organizations as open systems that must interact with their environments in order to survive is known as the systems theory approach. Organizations depend on their environments for several essential resources. Now, if you see, the typical model of a systems theory is the input-output analysis. The input is resources taken or received from the external environment. It is put through the process of conversion and transformation within a system, and the output is the work done of the system exported back into the environment. All the elements outside the system that have the potential to affect all or part of the system, and then you have a feedback. It's a dynamic system, it's not static. A continuing source of information concerning the relationship with the external environment used to make the necessary changes in order to bring about a change. Now, systems and chaos theories are also there. See, it's believed that if there is no order, there's going to be chaos. So basically, what is a system? There are closed and open systems. The key contributors to systems theory, systems thinking, systems activity, relevance also of these theories to international relations. Now, what is an open systems approach? Open systems approach was first applied by Katz and Kahn, who adopted the general systems theory to organizational behavior. Please understand, this theory is also used in public administration. This approach identifies organizational behavior by mapping the repeated cycles of input through output and feedback between an organization and its external environment. Please remember the graphic we put 2 slides earlier. Systems receive input from the environment either as information or in the form of resources. The systems then process the input internally, which is called throughput, and release outputs into the environment in an attempt to restore equilibrium to the environment. The system then seeks feedback to determine if the output was effective in restoring equilibrium. The systems approach focuses on the means used to maintain organizational survival and emphasize long-term goals rather than short-term goals of the goal attainment approach. What is a closed system? Theoretically, systems are considered either open or closed. Open organizations exchange information, energy, or resources with their environments, whereas closed systems do not. In reality, no social systems can be completely closed or open. They are usually identified as relatively closed or relatively open. The distinction between closed and open systems is determined by the level of sensitivity to the external environment. Closed systems are insensitive to environmental deviations, whereas open systems are responsive to changes in the environment. Homeostasis. The systems approach is an external standard that measures effectiveness based on long-term growth or sustainability. Effective systems are characterized by a steady state that systems theorists call homeostasis. Homeostasis is like a normal temperature which every body maintains. In the same way, does a system have a homeostasis? In order to avoid static connotations of equilibrium and to bring out the dynamic processual potential maintaining properties of basically unstable systems. If an organization is able to maintain homeostasis, which includes not just survival, but also growth, then it is effective, like a human body. This perspective is broader and more comprehensive than the goal attainment approach because it is not limited to measuring effectiveness as meeting goals determined by powerful internal coalitions that may or may not be propitious for the whole organization. Pfeffer and Salonick defined effectiveness as how well an organization is meeting the demands of the various groups and organizations that are concerned with its activities. Environment. Most effective organizations, according to systems theory, adapt to their environments. Pfeffer and Salonick describe the environment as the events occurring in the world that have any effect on the activities and outcomes of an organization. Environments range from static on one extreme to dynamic on the other. Static environments are relatively stable and predictable and do not have great variation, whereas dynamic environments are in a constant state of flux. Because environments cannot be completely static or constantly changing, organizations have varying levels of dynamic or static environments. Input. Organizations that exist in dynamic environments must be open in order to maintain homeostasis. Because dynamic environments are constantly changing, they create a lot of uncertainty about what an organization must do in order to survive and grow. The key to dealing with uncertainty is information. An open organization monitors its, this is very important. This is important in political organizations, like when you have elections, when you have the key to dealing with any uncertainty, or like for example, now in the present US elections, the results are not there. The key to it is full, clear, transparent information and accountability. And this is what the systems theory is telling you. An open organization monitors its environment and collects information about environmental deviations that is labeled as input. Input can also be thought of as a form of feedback. The most important information is negative input. According to systems theorists, because this information alerts the organization to problems that need to be corrected. Negative input tells the organization that it is doing something wrong, that it must make adjustments to correct the problem. Positive inputs tells the organization that it is doing something right and that it should continue or increase that activity. Adjustments. Organizations then organize and process this information to formulate solutions of responses to these changes. Open systems use information to respond to environmental changes and adjust accordingly. The adjustments affect the structure or process of the organization or both. The structure is what the organization is, whereas process is what the organization does. Adjustments are intended to reduce, maintain, and increase the deviations. For example, an organization can alter its structure by downsizing to remain competitive. Other organizations may change their processes in order to adhere to new environmental laws. Processing positive and negative input to adjust to environmental change is called throughput. The information, the organization analyzes it and tailors it strategically to fit with the organization's goals, values, and within the relationship context it holds with publics. Criticism. Systems theory, however, is not without some shortcomings. The first shortcoming relates to measurement, and the second is the issue of whether the means by which an organization survives really matter. This approach is that it focuses on the means necessary to achieve effectiveness rather than an organizational effectiveness itself. Measuring the means or process of an organization can be very difficult when compared to measuring specific end goals of the goal attainment approach. David Easton is the main political scientist whom we identify with the systems theory. David Easton was born in 1917 and died in 2014. He was a Canadian-born American political scientist. Easton, who was born in Toronto, Ontario, came to the United States in 1943. From 1947 to 1997, he served as a professor of political science at the University of Chicago. What are his contributions? One is he gives you one of the most important definitions of politics. He says politics can be defined as the authoritative allocation of values. In 1953, he proposed a systems theory of political science, or a framework in which various human behaviors either create input or are affected by output within a system of political action. Systems theory in political science is a highly abstract, partly holistic view of politics influenced by cybernetics. The adaptation of systems theory to political science was first conceived by David Easton in 1953. This is his thing, that is, you have inputs which are demands and support the political system it goes in. Then you have decisions and actions coming out as outputs and a continuous feedback into the environment, the political system. Easton's behavioral approach to politics proposed that a political system could be seen as a delimited and fluid system of steps in decision making. Greatly simplifying his model, influence of computers on the discipline of political science and the political system work within an environment. The environment generates different demands from different sections of society, such as reservation system in the matter of a certain group or demand for better transportation. Step 1. Changes in the social and physical environment surrounding a political system produce demands and supports for the action or the status quo directed as inputs towards the political system through political behavior. Step 2. These demands and supporting groups stimulate competition in a political system, leading to decisions or outputs directed at some aspect of the surrounding social and physical environment. 3. After a decision or output is made, a specific policy, it interacts with its environment and if it produces change in the environment, there are outcomes. 4. When a new policy interacts with its environment, outcomes may generate new demands or supports and groups in support or against the policy, feedback, or a new policy on some related matter. Step 5, feedback leads back to step 1, forming the never-ending cycle. If the system's functions are described then we have a stable political system. If the system breaks down, then we have a dysfunctional political system. Theory of political system. Employing the approach David System's The Political System book 1953, which he published, conceived the political system as integrating all activities through which social policy is formulated and executed. That is, the political system is the policy-making process. Systems theory analyzes interactions, structures, institutions, and processes pertaining to politics. Politics involves power, authority, physical coercion, and the allocation of values for society. There are 4 basic elements of the systems model: output, process, input, and feedback. Process represents the operations that occur to transform the inputs to the desired outputs. Inputs represent the basic materials or resources that will be transformed to the output. Feedback is the element of control. Open system. A system keeps evolving and its properties keep emerging through its interaction with the environment. Holistic view. Systems theory focuses on the arrangement of and relations between the parts that connect them into a whole. Easton presented his conceptual framework in the book, as I told you earlier. He elaborated it further in 1965 in his 2 books, A Framework of Political Analysis and Systems Analysis of Political Life. In the first, he presented an outline of the conceptual framework of systems analysis. In the next, he has further developed it in detail, but its title is misleading as he has not done therein any actual empirical analysis. Flow model. Easton's input and output analysis is also known as the flow model. It can be regarded as a form of functionalist analysis. Young finds his framework as the most inclusive systemic approach so far constructed specifically for political analysis by a political scientist. It is a product of an original insight of a political scientist. It is neither borrowed nor smuggled from other disciplines. Easton, according to Meehan, is the most consistent and systematic functionalist of political science, though he may not agree to that categorization. He attempts to provide a general functional theory of politics. System is the broad unit of his analysis, but his system is intermeshed with many inter and intra systems. Now, general systems theory. In this matter, he comes closer to the general systems theory, but he is interested in the constructivist aspect of the approach as he does not make it use in conducting empirical research. His concept of system is conceptual, analytical, and abstract. He wants to explicate a conceptual framework which may ultimately emerge as a general theory of totality of political science. Thus, he is the Talcott Parsons of political science. He is committed to stability, order, and persistence. But his perspective is political. The concept of system taken on towards integration of various disciplines. Systems concept makes empirical and comparative study possible even of those political institutions apart from the state, such as international political system, city, political party, etc. The concept is helpful in studying changes like transformation, feedback, exchange, tension, conflict, and development. Besides Easton, Gabriel Almond, Talcott Parsons, Carl Duche, Martin Kaplan, and others have made such studies. Systems theory analyzes interactions, structures, institutions, and processes pertaining to politics. Politics involves power, authority, physical coercion, and the allocation of values for society. Political system. Political system is one of these subsystems. When the political system is to be studied as a whole with its intra-subsystems, then it is treated as a system. Besides that, system can be considered as a part of the environment. Thus, the concept of system, both in interlocking micro and macro forms, saves us from the error of considering systems as isolated, separate, or independent entities. According to Almond, the political system in a society is legitimate, order-maintaining, and transforming system. Weisman maintains that every political system involves political structures, actors, or roles performed by their agents, interaction patterns existing between individuals and collectivities and political process. In the political system of Kaplan, there are recognizable multivariate interests. Authoritative allocation of values. This is what he defines politics as. There are regular structures and channels to reach the decisions and judgments related to particular interests. General rules are prescribed to govern the actors and activities relating to particular decisions and judgments. Easton therefore regards the political system engaged in decision making and implementing the authoritative allocation of values for a society. Now, political system, what are the features? A political system, according to Michaels, has the following features. 1. It is a permanent entity existing amid broader environment and includes many other units. 2. It consists of an identifiable, measurable set of interdependent elements or variables. 3. It has boundaries which keep it separate from the general environment. 4. It is constituted around certain problems, objectives, or goals and builds up certain structures. 5. Along with these of specific problems and evolution of goals, it develops specific structures and processes leading to more and more differentiation. Conceptual framework. In fact, Easton uses political theory for conceptual framework and vice versa. Either of them, 1, enables the researcher to identify the significant political variables and describe their mutual relations. 2, provides categories for comparison and fills up the gaps where more empirical research is needed. And 3, makes research more reliable and fruitful for other researchers. For interpreting the life processes of the system, political system, one requires a scheme of symbolic representation called by Easton as a conceptual framework or the structure of analysis, which is different from concrete political system or structure of institutions popularly known as government. Qualities. The key variable in Easton's frame of reference is polities, which consists in the interactions pertaining to authoritative allocation of values for society. He looks at these interactions in the form of a system which persistently performs the tasks of allocating of values. He likes empirically to observe the system and the way in which it persistently performs its task. For this purpose, he presents the concept of input and output along with feedback and others. Political processes. In his framework, deals with political processes, it is dynamic. The framework on the one hand keeps away the researcher from concentrating on too narrow a field, while on the other stops him from being lost into a field too wide. Along with disciplining the subject of politics to a higher level, it provides all important dimensions and parameters for the development of empirical history. However, it may be made clear that his conceptual framework is not a theory that totally lacks explanatory power. And this is Morton Kaplan, another, systems theorist. We'll also deal with him in balance of power when we go. which he developed. He's also an American political scientist and a professor at the University of Chicago. Belongs to the famous Chicago School, started by Harold Lasswell of political science, and Hans Morgenthau is also part of that school. He was also president of Professors of World Peace Academy International, and he occupied several positions. Morton Kaplan, he attended Temple University and Stanford University and received his PhD from Columbia University in 1951. He has held scholarships at different, and these are his books. What is important for us is what are the books he wrote. Science, Language and the Human Condition, Law in a Democratic Society, System and Processes in International Politics, a seminal work in the scientific study of international politics. He is a critic of communism and of the policies of the Soviet Union. In 1979, he edited a book called The Many Phases of Communism. Kaplan introduced a new analytical tool to the study of international relations, system analysis. His view contrasts with that of John Rawls that it might be possible to isolate some basic social and political rules. Rather, Kaplan's alternative theory of justice is his test in principle, a kind of decision procedure for evaluating social, political, and moral choices, which attempts to circumvent the limitations of an egocentric and culturally narrow perspective while producing sufficient context to make a judgment. Kaplan used systems analysis to differentiate among the various types of international systems of balance of power system, the loose bipolar. He gave us different types of systems in the balance of power. The second possible approach to general systems theory is through the arrangement of theoretical systems and constructs in a hierarchy of Kenneth Boulding. Kenneth Boulding is also a very important political scientist for us. He is basically an economist, educator and peace philosopher. He published over 36 books and 112 articles. Boulding was the author of two classics, The Image, Knowledge in Life and Society, Conflict and Defense, a General Theory. He is also the co-founder of the General Systems Theory and a founder of numerous ongoing intellectual projects in both economics and the skeleton of science. Two possible approaches to organization of general systems theory suggest themselves. They are complementary, but for us it is worth. The first approach is to look over the empirical universe and pick out certain general phenomena which are there in other different disciplines and seek to build up general theoretical models relevant to those phenomena. The second approach is to arrange the empirical fields in a hierarchy of complexity of organization of their basic and unit of behavior and try to develop an abstraction appropriate to both. So level of a general systems, Kenneth Boulding describes 9 levels of a general systems theory. 1, a static structure, the framework. 2, a moving level of necessary predetermined motions. 3, a control mechanism. 4, an open system or self-maintaining structure. 5, a generic societal level. 6, the animal level, designing or purposeful behavior and self-awareness. 7, the human level. The nurse manager can process the knowledge and skills of management to produce specific results. 8, the level of social organizations. 9, transcendental systems. So if you see clearly, this is how it will be. If you put a pyramidal model, frameworks, clockworks, cybernetics, open systems, genetics, societal, animal, human, social organizations, and transcendental. So if you see, we have had a general discussion today on the systems theory, the first school of the scientific school of international relations, which made a paradigm shift from the traditional school to the scientific schools. It also made a difference of one of the few lectures we did from what is to what ought to be At the same time, the fact-value dichotomy. Now there was an attempt to move towards facts and say that should be value-free also in the social sciences, very much like the physical or biological sciences. Thank you, students. We'll move on to the second lecture in the scientific school in our next lecture. Thank you.